Greetings, everyone. These are the videos that I had promised earlier in the week regarding the end of the Cold War between the Soviets and the U.S. And as was emphasized during the lecture, the short clips here I'm going to show you of the two really world-changing summits. The impetus, the crux of the demise of the Soviet Union was Reagan's arms race. And the epicenter was the Strategic Defense Initiative, otherwise known as SDI. So the idea behind that was to intercept incoming missiles. And the Reagan administration could see that the Soviets could not afford to do this. When Reagan took office, the economy was in shambles, a 13% inflation rate, and shortly after taking office, he enacted some major tax cuts, regulation cuts, and it brought about the longest peacetime economic boom in our nation's history. And therefore, we could afford this arms escalation. So you're going to see an overview of the two summits. The first is in Geneva, Switzerland. The second in Reykjavik, Iceland. And it's the first time Reagan meets with the Soviets. As I also had mentioned in the lecture, Reagan, when he took office, he said, we're not going to meet with the Soviets anymore. They lie, they cheat, they're an evil empire, a lot of things like that. And it made a lot of people nervous here. And he said, we're not going to meet with them until we can have we meet from a position of strength. So late 85, early 86, obviously Reagan thought we were in that situation. So the drama, the stage is set for the first meeting, right? The Soviets had realized they had a formidable opponent. And so you'll see the interchange of the first meeting, Gorbachev and Reagan coming together, and just high stakes drama. These summits can't be overstated how important they were in changing the world. Again, Gorbachev's goal, talk Reagan out of SDI. All right. So I'm going to show obviously the first clip here, the first summit, the overview of it in Geneva. I'm going to pause it, and then we'll go right into the second and last summit in Reykjavik, Iceland.
Yep. Ever the protector.
3 months later, Ronald Reagan would have another summit in Geneva. Ronald Reagan had warned that the Soviets cheat and lie. He had opposed every arms deal American presidents had made with the Soviets in the 1970s. But he arrived in Geneva in November 1985, confident that he could handle the new leader of the evil empire.
Conservative Republicans, for 50 years, had tended to denigrate the importance of personal diplomacy. It's the legacy of the Yalta Conference. And they thought FDR had sold us out. And then we sold out China. We were always selling out someone. And the sale was usually by a president who thought that if only he could get in a room with his Soviet counterpart, that his charm and his arguments would prevail. That's the conservative tradition. And yet Reagan clearly believed that he could do that. The force of his personality and of his arguments, and above all, of his sincerity, would impress themselves upon the Soviets.
Secretary Weinberger was less sure. His letter urging Reagan not to hamstring SDI was leaked to the press and seen as an effort to sabotage the summit. Mikhail Gorbachev, General Secretary of the Communist Party, came to Geneva to negotiate with the man Yuri Andropov had considered impossible, called mad, compared to Hitler. The vigorous 54-year-old, whose charming smile was said to hide teeth of iron, had come to meet the 74-year-old president who had railed against communism for almost 40 years.
I felt a strong fear, a palpable sense of fear throughout the delegation that this young, formidably intelligent, aggressive Soviet leader was going to run rings around our gentle, slow, slightly doddery, aging president. The American delegation was afraid that he was going to be outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and diplomatically perhaps destroyed.
What's the first priority?
Reagan had lots to worry about, including a chore at the Aga Khan's villa where he stayed.
My friend, Sally, said to me, now there's just one thing. My son has some goldfish that he adores, and would you mind feeding the goldfish in the morning? And Ronnie, of course, right away, well, of course, absolutely. And one morning, he went into the little boy's room, and one goldfish was dead. Well, I thought Ronnie was going to die. He called everybody in there and he said, you've got to get a take this goldfish out and find one that looks exactly like it so that we can replace this.
The goldfish replaced, it was time to meet Mikhail Gorbachev.
And I see it now in memory in slow motion. It is supremely dramatic. This great gleaming black gazelle comes, whispering round the corner, on the gravel, crunches to a halt. Down the stairs comes this great, gliding, blue-suited, unbelievably self-confident and calm president, without a coat on, in the freezing air. And out of the big black Russian limousine comes this awkward, short, rather dumpy, heavily overcoated, heavily scarfed, hatted communist leader, who fumbled with his scarf and fumbled with his coat as he approached this great benign presence. When they met at the foot of the stairs, Reagan towered over Gorbachev. Gorbachev looked up into Reagan's face, looked at him very intensely. Reagan smiled down at him and then gently choreographed him up the stairs.
Gorbachev's in standard Politburo hat, standard Politburo overcoat. It reminds me of the KGB agent from bad American films. So I said to myself that we have lost this fourth opportunity. We have lost this first round.
When the delegations met, Reagan recalled, I took Gorbachev through the long history of Soviet aggression. I wanted to explain why the free world had good reason to put up its guard against the Soviet bloc.
His language was brutal. He would say things like, let me tell you, Mr. General Secretary, why we fear you and why we despise your system. Now that, in a diplomatic meeting, is extremely confrontational language.
The president, from the very start, started to speak in a kind of lecturing tone, as though I was a suspect or maybe a student. And I cut him short. I said, Mr. President, you are not a prosecutor. I'm not the accused. You're not a teacher. I'm not a student.
But Reagan somehow was able to say things like that, but at the same time, he seemed to have a sweetness and a benign quality about him that neutralized, or at least took the edge off, what from Richard Nixon would seem like a declaration of war.
To ease the tension, Reagan suggested they talk in private. As they walked to a less formal house by the lake, they chatted about Reagan's movie career, the first time they had talked as human beings.
Gorbachev immediately started to like Reagan. That was a very surprising thing. I think Reagan had something which was so dear to Gorbachev, and that is sincerity.
This human vision and human touch. And when he talked with our leaders, he talked very emotional. And he came across. This is a human being. He is trying to explain himself to you. So it maybe for the first time our leaders started to think that on the other side it's not a machine, it's not some robot.
I think that people don't reckon with the power of charm and just personal persuasiveness. And, you know, when my father kind of turns the high beams on, even somebody like Gorbachev tends to melt.
As they walked back to rejoin their delegations, Reagan invited Gorbachev to Washington. Gorbachev reciprocated with an invitation to Moscow. On the second day, Reagan found Gorbachev ready to talk about building down their arsenals, but determined to kill SDI. Reagan resisted.
Gorbachev was visibly irritated. He said, "Why you are repeating the same and the same thing to me? I've heard that many times. Stop this rubbish. Tell me something more." It was literally so. It was a harsh discussion.
But at the end, the mood was warm. Reagan left Geneva with SDI intact and an agreement. A nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. The world breathed a sigh of relief. There was another communique to Hussein Aga Khan and his parents. Dear friends, on Tuesday, I found one of your fish dead in the bottom of the tank. I don't know what could have happened, but I added 2 new ones, same kind. I hope this was all right. Thanks for letting us live in your lovely home. Ronald Reagan.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I haven't gotten such a reception since I was shot, Reagan would quip. The image of Ronald Reagan as a trigger-happy cowboy had begun to fade.